All right, welcome back. This is Benjamin Hadfield. I'm a technical dive instructor, high altitude here in Idaho. But the type of technical dive that I do doesn't even begin to compare to what Karen van der Oever does in South Africa. She's absolutely amazing and holds the record for the deepest dive for a woman, open circuit in Bushmansgat, South Africa. Karen, thanks for coming back and joining us for part two.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Bushman's Cut. It's kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. It's a cave. It's deep. It's the deepest point you can go. What was the narrowest point you had to push through on Bushman's Gat?
So the narrowest point is actually at the entrance of the cave, and that is a small chimney. I guess it's maybe 2 meters, if even that wide. So that's a little bit tight to get through when you've got twin 18s and a couple of stages. It becomes a little bit tight to get through. But as you go deeper, the cave opens up. The roof of the cave actually sits at 60 meters. And then deeper than that, the sides fall away. It's huge inside. At 100 meters, you can't see the sides, you can't see the floor, you can't see the scene, you can see nothing. You're in just this void of darkness.
Wow. And so you did 805 feet. How far away from the actual bottom is that to the deepest point?
So the water level actually at that time was relatively high. So I estimate the deepest point in the cave to be 288, maybe 290 meters. But we went straight down the middle, so it's there's a bit of a sort of a higher point there. So I estimate that at around 260. So probably not too far away from the bottom. Probably 20 meters or so from the bottom at that point.
Wow. And who put the chip in that you actually ended up getting?
So that's I had impartial witnesses, independent witnesses that came along for that purpose to verify that everything was above board and done according to the requirements that Guinness would need to verify it. So that line that went in, so we had a separate record line. That was purely used for adding those depth tags that was measured prior to the dive 2 days before or 3 days before by the independent witnesses. They then took the tags, marked the depth, signed them, kept those under lock and key. And then the day before the dive, that line went in, or 2 days before, and they added those tags on as the line went into the water.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. So, Karen, as you prepare for this kind of stuff, there's just a lot of preparation, and I mean, it's the old joke that well, it looks like it took you 8 hours to do. This took you years to do, truthfully. Um, as we go through things like this, we all fail and succeed. Can you tell me a time that you just failed and how did you handle it?
Oh, I think I've had a number of dives that have been sort of epic fails, I guess. Obviously, having a dive plan and a target depth and not reaching that depth, that's happened numerous times. I think one of the most epic fails was we'd gone on a weekend. I had 150 meters in my head again. We'd managed to get to 108 meters, and I was diving with my husband on that dive. He called the dive at 108 meters. I still was like, why? We could go deeper, but luckily we did. I ended up developing decompression illness on that dive. It was a type 1 mild bend, but it just didn't go well, and that kind of puts a setback. You think, oh gosh, I only did 108 meters, and now all of these things that happened. That's just crazy. But I guess you got to deal with it in your stride, and I think use every opportunity as a learning opportunity. And we do that now for every single deep dive that we do as a team. We get together after the dive and we all have a discussion what went well, what didn't go well, what can we change, what can we do better. So each of these dives is used as an opportunity to learn and to make it better next time.
That's amazing. And that's a great thing to do. Was a post dive rigidity after it to say, how can we done better? What should we do next time to make this even better?
Yeah, and,
Right.
and I think it's not just for super deep dives like this, but for technical dives, in general, there's a lot of key learnings that we can take away from some of these dives. So even though we may not be planning to go break another record, we still have that debrief to say, okay, what worked, what didn't, what can we do better, so we know for future expeditions, whether they be just technical expeditions or deep diving expeditions, of what we can do to make it go smoother.
Absolutely. So, how do you mentally prepare for dives like this?
Oh, that's quite hard. I must say, some of the dives leading up to I would have nightmares before some of them, to be quite honest, to be like, it's just, I don't know, it's hard. I think, you've got to realize that what you're doing is a risk. You can't pretend that you're not taking a risk. It is a risk, and as much as you've mitigated those risks, because we've looked at every single possible thing we think could go wrong and put mitigation and action plans in place to deal with those. Something could pop up, and there is a risk that ultimately you may not come back from a dive like that. So that plays on my mind a little bit. Why am I doing this? Should I be doing this, knowing ultimately that it could lead to fatalities? And it did give me some sleepless nights. But I think I worked through that by playing the dive over and over and over in my head, of what I need to do at each step of the dive, and then also, if things go wrong, what am I going to do? So playing potential scenarios of, I have light failure, or I have DV failure, or something happens, or I have computer failure, or playing those scenarios out in my head, and saying, what am I going to do in that situation? So that if it does happen, I know that I've got this. I know that I have a plan to manage a situation like that, and I think that helps. Psychologically, it makes you feel more prepared, and much calmer, for a dive like that.
That's amazing. So, our industry really is about risk and risk management. Can you tell us the biggest risk you took and how did you overcome it?
I think with a dive like this, there's so many risks, to be quite honest. I think the biggest one, diving open circuit, is obviously ICD, isobaric counter diffusion. You've got to change mixes. Have you got that right? And I mean, I know there's a lot of theories, rule of fifths being one of them, but it's just that it's a theory. There's no empirical evidence to say this is what we should be doing and this is 100% foolproof. I mean, I don't think it is. So I think that was one of the biggest risks. And if you develop ICD, I mean, especially if it's deeper, but that's going to be fatal. You spinning around, you don't know whether you're up or down. You may not even be able to hold a DV in your mouth. What's going to happen in a situation like that? And I think that was about preparing the support divers then to deal with a situation like that. What's going to happen if I'm in that state? You guys potentially have to dive for me because I can't do it anymore. So it was around working as a team. So I think we did it as a team. We went through every conceivable risk. Things like breathing the wrong gas at the wrong depth, um, torch failure, losing gas, decompression, unconscious diver. We practiced unconscious diver lifts, and how we would get them through depth. We had big conversations around, what if one of the deep divers was unconscious? They've got hours and hours of deco. We can't bring them to the surface. What do we do? So we kind of ran through scenarios. Well, do we change gases for them? How do you do that underwater? We tried it. Doesn't work that successfully underwater when you're trying to put DVs in and out of an unconscious diver's mouth. But these are all the things that we sort of thought about and ran through and practiced, to see what can work, what can't work, and try to mitigate every conceivable risk we could think of.
Right on. That is the best way to do it is practice, practice, practice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, how do you ensure your safety during deep dives in remote locations that are extreme like this?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, we had to think very carefully about how we would initiate a rescue, in a situation like that. So there was a number of parts to that. One was, how do we get a diver from the water back to the car area, or the where we've set up the recompression chamber? That's a 300-meter walk, but it's not a it's a climb across boulders, and it's a bit of a hike. How do you get someone out of there? We had to play through a number of possibilities. We thought about, there's a cliff face on one side of Bushmansgat. We thought about maybe putting the person in a basket stretcher and hoisting them up alongside the cliff face. Then realized maybe that's not the best option. If that goes wrong and that whole thing falls in the water, well, you've lost the diver anyway. So eventually resorted to, we had to carry a person out of there. So we had to practice that, and we had to make sure we had enough support divers and enough divers that had not just done deep dives themselves, that would be at risk of developing decompression illness, to be able to carry a diver out of the water. And then, of course, we needed to think about, if it was really a serious emergency, we needed medical care on site. So we had a doctor on site. We had all potential medications that we would need in that instance to administer to a diver, to obviously prolong their life until they could get to the nearest medical facility. And then, as I said, we had a one-man recompression chamber on site, but for very serious decompression incidences that probably would not have been suitable. We also looked at having on standby various medical personnel, helicopters, etc., in case we needed to evacuate a diver. And we worked very, very closely with Dan. Dan was involved the whole way, especially on the day where we had a WhatsApp group that was set up with Dan, so they knew who was in the water, who was out the water, exactly what was going on. So if there was an emergency, they could immediately start putting plans in place to deal with that.
That's amazing, and the amount of planning you have to do on any dive is impressive. But the amount of diving planning you have to do on any dive at that size is amazing. So good job on that, by the way.
Thanks.
So what was the biggest challenge you had to deal with when you entered tech diving?
Sure, it was a very long time ago. I'm trying to think. I was still a student when I entered tech diving. I think so. Obviously, equipment was a challenge. I think it wasn't. It was just being a student. I of course did not have the funds to buy all of the nice, fancy technical equipment that was available. So a lot of it was big borrowed and university equipment that was rented. Um, Yeah, I can't think of any specific challenges. I know when I started tech diving, I've always been drawn to diving deep. Always been the one that pushed the boundaries and pushed the depth limits a little bit, to the dismay of my instructors. But I was always that one that didn't stick to the depth limits.
I get that completely. I think my instructors would say the exact same thing. You're going too deep. Stop. And so what advice would you give to others that are starting to enter into the tech field?
Yeah, I mean it's a really great sport, tech diving and technical diving itself. And I mean there's a lot of facets to technical diving. It could be cave diving, it could be deep diving. It's definitely something that if you're interested in, you must try it. It is equipment intensive. There's a lot of equipment needed to do tech diving. It does become quite costly. So you would need to obviously look at your budget and manage that. But again, you don't need to go out and buy everything all at once. You can buy a little bit here, a little bit there as you go along. Yeah, and again, take your time. And I think I haven't said that enough. Is don't rush into doing something. Enjoy the journey. It's not about the end product or the end destination. It's about the whole journey. So take in what you can, learn what you can, and take your time getting there.
I like that. Take your time and enjoy the journey. And I think that's one of the hardest things I have in teaching just the basic open water students is slow down. Let's look at this square foot of the ocean and see what we get out of this square foot. And then maybe we'll move on to the next. So we don't have to see the whole ocean, one dig of dive, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So being a woman, have you noticed any difference in the way men and women approach dive training?
Um, I can't say that I have really, to be quite honest. I mean, obviously the training that is very standardized,
Sure.
again, across the agencies, and the way you train it, depending on the agency, is quite um, standardized. There's not too much flexibility in the way you can train things. So I don't think so though. I think I haven't, but again, I don't know that many lady instructors that I've had the opportunity to work with or instruct with. I certainly haven't been instructed by many, so I don't know if I'm a good judge of making that comparison.
How have you, so you, as you went through your training, you certainly learned one thing. what did you learn through that training that you changed as you started training others?
I think for me, it was about paying as much sort of attention to the knowledge and also the skills. I think as you move into tech diving, obviously your in water time and your skills are important, but the knowledge behind that is just as important. And I think a lot of time we pay a lot of attention on, are your skills good, can you do this, and we spend a lot of time in the water, which is important. You need your skills to be good, you need them to be fresh, you need them, but there's a lot of knowledge that goes behind tick diving and decompression diving and planning those dives. And I think that I always try to get a nice balance between both. You need to have the in-water time and you need to make sure your skills are good, but you also need to understand the theory behind what you're doing, the risks, the theory, because sometimes you might get into a situation where you need to make a decision on the fly. Maybe something's happened and you need to make a decision, and if you don't have that knowledge, you might not be able to make an informed decision. If something's happened, you've lost gas or whatever the case is, do you skip this decode, do you not, do you switch to this gas or do you switch to your bottom? If you don't have the required knowledge to support that, you might not be able to make a good decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. Having enough knowledge to know what's going on, that's for sure. So, what was the biggest surprise or most interesting thing that you learned when you moved into Trimix?
I think for me, one of the challenges was how to select deco gases. I think a lot of people are diving rebreathers, so they don't always have that challenge, although probably with bailout gases they need to apply the same principles. But for me, that was I'd asked so many people, how do you go about selecting the right gas for your decompression profile? And a lot of people, not really sure. We just kind of, you know, and all people would tell me, here's a dive plan. I dive this, it works. You can dive this plan, and I'll be like, okay, but I don't want to dive your plan. I need to dive my plan.
Sure.
So I think for me that was a bit, it was a challenge because nobody I spoke to could tell me. I literally had to go and do the research and the reading and look it up and kind of build that knowledge myself. So I found that um, a bit of a challenge personally for myself. And then I think deep diving in itself, I think getting time at depth. At first, it was touch and go, 100 meters, let's leave, and getting myself to actually spend time at that depth was quite a challenge because you get there, you're very nervous. It's at 100 meters or 110 or whatever it is. And for me, I want to get out of there, right? I gotcha, let's go. And I have to force myself to say, you know what? We need to spend time down here. Let's stay here 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, so that we can build deco and build time. And I think that was also personally one of the challenges that I had to overcome was actually getting myself to spend time at depth. And now when I look back on that, I mean, we do often as a fun dive, we'll go down to 110 meters as the bottom of the shaft at Kamati Springs, and we just for fun because we've got stuff to do. We spend so much time down there doing random things. We just did extreme ironing the other day. We took an ironing board down and iron and video each other. Just for fun. It was cool. But I look at the amount of time that I spend there now, and it's like compared to when I started, it was hard. It was like I just want to touch and get out of here.
I think that bears a question. Extreme ironing.
Yeah, apparently it's a thing. Like to do ironing in the most extreme places. I think it might have been done a little bit deeper than what we did it. So yeah, we thought we'd try it. We took a ironing board, iron, a shirt, and kind of 110 meters decided to iron. So
I love it. That's the most unique game I've seen in depth. That's for sure. You actually carried an iron and an ironing board and a shirt. That it's not like because it's not like the gear you're carrying is light or small, right? You're carrying a lot of gear. I mean, at that point, you're carrying at least 4 to 5 bottles total, including your twins as well. So that's
it was
unique.
a
I
small
like
it
it.
was a small ironing board.
Oh, okay, not like a full size. Good, good. At least it was a small one. So you did bring up that you had to search out how to choose your deco gas. How do you choose your deco gas then?
So I look at a number of things. So obviously the biggest one being Steve Burton's rule of fifths, obviously, and make sure that it applies to that. I also look at the density of the deco gas and make sure that the gas that I'm switching to is not significantly denser than the gas that I'm breathing currently, because obviously you don't want to impede off gassing or have any of those challenges. So it's mostly rule of fifths and gas density, and then of course all the other bits and pieces, your partial pressure, equivalent narcotic depth, etc. But mainly the density and rule of fifths.
Right on. So what's the highest density that you like to go to as a deco gas?
So my deco gas densities are usually pretty low. I don't really have a highest, but I probably wouldn't exceed the recommended 5.4 grams per liter on a deco gas.
Fair enough. Not a worry. Just I wanted to make sure we understood all the criteria used. Somebody like you is definitely amazing. So, Karen, in your opinion, how has your work inspired the next generation of explorers?
I don't know. I'd like to think it has, but I don't really know. I'm hoping that I've inspired some women to maybe start, get involved in technical diving and start doing some more extreme dives. I think for many, many years, I mean, there's many women technical divers, but not really anyone doing such extreme depths. And I still don't know if there is. Maybe there is. Maybe there isn't. But I think the men's record is 100 meters away from the women's record currently, and there's no reason for that. We should be right up there with them in terms of records. I think again, I think maybe it's just because women are less risk takers than men, maybe. Um, and I guess women didn't really do, in the early sort of 80s, 90s, maybe even the 2000s, women didn't, it was a bit frowned upon, I guess, women doing extreme sports. So maybe that's why there's a bit of a gap. But I really like to, I'd hope that I have motivated or encouraged other women to sort of take up the sport. It is possible, and there should be more of us doing it. There's definitely no reason that we can't have the men's depth record as well someday.
Absolutely. So, what's your favorite dive?
Um, I have a number of them. It's hard to choose, I think. Obviously, Bushmansgat, I enjoy it. Although it's a bit strange because there's nothing there. There's just darkness. There's you. There's this void. There's this darkness. There's the sound of your own breathing. But I quite like that. I like the calmness and the quietness that comes with that. Um, I also enjoy the bottom of the shaft at Kamati Springs, 110 meters. It's a go-to dive. We do a lot of it. It's a really nice dive. I don't know why. Again, not a huge amount to see there, except it's in a flooded mine, so some old mining equipment. But I don't know. I do like that dive as well. And then I think some of my favorite cave dives have been diving Mexico, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. The caves are just so spectacularly, breathtakingly beautiful. It's amazing. I've had the opportunity to dive there once, and it's just completely different to the caves that we dive. So it was incredible. I must say, really, really nice experience.
Right on. So, what's next for Karen?
I don't know. Um, I don't think I'll stop deep diving, of course, and I don't think I'll stop technical diving. Whether I'll be pushing any more sort of depth records, I'm not so sure about that. But we're certainly looking at doing a lot more exploration type diving. Um, Something myself and my husband have been talking about for a little while is doing exploration into Africa. There's a lot of unexplored caves in Africa. People haven't dived them. So we've just started sort of an exercise of trying to figure out where they are. And actually, just recently made contact with someone up in Zambia who has confirmed that there's an extensive cave system on their farm that nobody's ever dived. So we're planning to go and have a look and see what's down there. So, yeah, more exploration kind of diving, I think, now.
Right on, Karen. Karen, thank you for your time today. You've been amazing and a wealth of knowledge for sure. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Well, guys, there you have it. Karen van de Over has that good Dutch name that's really hard for my English mouth to apparently get around sometimes. But she's absolutely amazing. She's got all kinds of cool stories. She holds the record for the deepest cave dive for a woman in Bushmansgat. And I try and get the accent right there. So we look at it one way, and I hear the Afrikaners say it a different way. So I appreciate her coming on. Now, guys, my name is Benjamin Hadfield. I'm a technical dive instructor in Idaho, teaching technical diving in Idaho and Florida, and just having a great time with it. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button because you don't want to miss any of the oceanic goodness we have for people that are amazing like Karen. She has just been a jewel and a pleasure to have on our show. Karen, again, thank you.
Thank you.